Hey guys, Liko here. Hope you're doing really well. Welcome to my Magicka Necromancer build and rotation video for the Flames of Ambition patch. The Magicka Necromancer has been hands down the most popular class when it comes to 12-person trials, and they are also so useful in all types of PvE content. Here, I am happy to bring you two Magicka Necromancer setups generously provided by Bread and Milk. Firstly, I will go through some of the general build choices for the Magicka Necromancer, namely race, Mundus Stone and food. Once that's done, let's dive right into the two different setups that we have today. These will both include the gear, skills, the Parse showcase, as well as a quick look through the combat metrics and the new blue CP allocations too. I'll also leave a static rotation in the description beneath the video. The first setup is a classic Magicka Necromancer setup with two Inferno Staves. The second is a high risk, high reward vampire setup using two daggers on the front bar, something that we haven't seen to be effective on a Magicka class in a long time. Bread has also a non-vamp version of this on his channel, which I highly recommend that you check out once you're done here. He also has a good selection of Magicka Necromancer gameplay clips on his channel as well. Without further ado, let's get going. Choice of race. So in the last couple of patches, Ultima, Dunmer and Khajiit have been the best choices for Magicka DPS, with a shout out to Breton for its extra sustain benefits. In this coming update, it is still largely the same, though Khajiit probably offers the best all-around package by a tiny amount thanks to its extra HP and recovery passives to go with its critical damage. Ultima, which has probably been the most popular Magicka class till now, is of course still right up there, and if your current character is an Ultima, you can quite happily stick with your choice if you don't fancy a race change. Dunmer is as always neck and neck with Ultima, so out of the three you literally can't go wrong. For the choice of Mundus Stone, in many cases for Magicka DPS, I'll recommend the Thief Mundus for extra crit chance. If you are using Mechanical Acuity, which briefly gives 100% crit chance, the effect of the Thief will be wasted during that time, so the Shadow Mundus Stone will most likely be the way to go in that case for the extra critical damage. Either way, your choice will depend on your exact build and setup, so out of these two, you really can't go wrong. For the choice of food, this will most likely depend on your level of sustain and your HP threshold that you're comfortable running with. If you could do with some extra sustain and you don't feel like you need extra HP, then the Ghastly Eyeball will be the way to go. If you're practicing on a target dummy, then I would also recommend selecting this food. If your sustain is decent but you need a bit of extra help with it and you need some HP as well, then I would recommend the Clockwork Citrus Fillet, which gives the best mixture of everything useful. If your sustain is good enough, you can go with a max HP, max Magicka food such as Artane Pickled Fishbowl. And yeah, I mean, this should give you the most DPS as long as you don't run out of resources. Note though that there are worse max HP, max Magicka foods out there. This one is the best one. Okay, so for setup number one, the non-vampire setup, here are the gear choices. For monster set, Zaan is a good choice, with Dummy House, more of the Infernal, and two crate pieces being good alternatives. Mother's Sorrow is an ever reliable set which gives a good amount of crit chance. It's been weakened in this recent patch, but you still can't go wrong with it. Siroria is the strongest general purpose Magicka set out there, stand in the ring and do more damage. Not always the best choice, but a solid choice in many cases. Here we are using the Inferno Staff on the front bar, but if you haven't already, start collecting dual wield pieces, as they'll come in handy in some cases, especially daggers and swords. Finally, we'll have the Maelstrom Inferno Staff, a timeless classic, on our back bar. There are a number of alternatives, with Medusa, Burning Spellweave being the two examples, and Mechanical Acuity is also up there, and can be useful depending on the fight, despite overlapping with the Necromancer Execute crit passive. So, for the skills, on the front bar, on the Siroria Inferno Staff bar, we have Structured Entropy, a dot that heals and does Magicka damage. It also provides major skill passives. We have Stalking Blastbones, which is one of these strong semi-spammable skills. Cast this 1 in 3 whenever possible. Passively, this skill also contributes 10% crit chance when the enemy is below 25%. Avid Boneyard also has that passive, and this is a ground AoE lasting 10 seconds, which also provides a synergy that you yourself can activate. The Oomorph is also useful, providing AoE Major Breach. Inner Light is purely slotted for passives, you do not need to cast this ability at all. Detonating Scything. Now this is a funny one, it's a ground AoE that deals disease damage and can be reactivated early at no cost for some burst damage. You can use this skill as a semi-spammable skill too, and you can also choose the other morph if you require the Magicka sustain benefit. This skill also has the Execute crit chance passive associated with it. Shooting Star is a good single target ultimate and is there for the major kill passive as well. On our back bar we have Barbed Trap, which is a stamina based dot and provides minor force and also does some decent damage over time. Mystic Orb is an AoE dot thing which deals really good cleave damage. Skeletal Arcanist is a pet-like thing which does small bursts of shock damage. I always end up casting this skill around town and have the guards chasing me since it's a criminal act. Scalding Rune is a dot with a pretty decent upfront damage portion, so again this can be a good semi-spammable. Unstable Wall is the beneficiary of the VMA staff, which buffs your light attacks when the enemy sits in the wall. If you recast this early, it can also be a pretty good semi-spammable as well. And finally, the Destra ultimate is a great AoE burst and it's really good to start fights with. Obviously, if you're on Colossus duty, you'll want to be slotting that somewhere on your bar as well. You'll have noticed that I keep going on about semi-spammables, and that's because we do not have a true spammable in this setup. But if we did, we would probably pick the Skull or Force Pulse. So we've started a Parse. First of all, pay attention again to how red lines up the starting burst, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Key takeaways here are to cast your blast burns 1 and 3 and otherwise keep up your dots, and use semi-spammables in the time windows where all your dots are happily ticking. That's the general gist of it. I'll leave an example static rotation in the description below for your convenience. I hope you enjoyed the Parse. I'll meet you in a few minutes where we can briefly have a look through the CMX and look at the blue CP Slottables that have been chosen. After that, we'll take a look through the vampire builds that have been popular with the groups trying to push the limits. Okay, so straight off the bat, Stalking Blast Bones damage is right up there. Light attack damage is strong as well thanks to the VMA stuff, but also the 50% power uptime from casting Structured Entropy and Scalding Rune. The Detonating Siphon, Scalding Rune and Unstable Wall direct damage hits are contributing nicely to the damage as well. Eagle-eyed viewers will also have noticed that Bread is using a 6 light, 1 heavy setup. The penetration passives from light armor aren't as heavily needed as Necromancer as much as other classes, and nor is the crit chance or sustain to an extent, so the extra Magicka from the Undaunted passives, from wearing a heavy piece, and the free HP works out nicely. So looking at the blue CP, the Slottables chosen are Biting Aura, Thaumaturge, Fighting Finesse, and Backstabber. Backstabber isn't suitable for all trials, for example Sunspire where you stand in front of the dragons, so I would choose any alternative Slottable here. Worth mentioning as well here, just in case, but the Slottables are the important decisions to be made, and the rest of the blue CP can be earned and spent as you gain them. I would recommend a dedicated CP guide if you would like guidance on some of those choices. Alright, so moving on to setup 2, the Vampire build. Let's look at the differences in gear. Firstly, in this setup, we keep the monster set and only 4 pieces of Martha's Sorrow are slotted. Although alternatively, you can slot 5 pieces of Sorrow and go with 1 monster piece. It's entirely up to you. Next, we are using Siroria daggers here. Daggers are interesting because they provide much more spell damage and crit chance than an Inferno Staff, which in return gives 8% damage to single target abilities. Obvious downsides to the daggers are the restriction of light attacks to melee range, so only dual wield if you're able to consistently be in that range, otherwise the trade-off simply isn't worth it. The Ring of Pale Order is the one item that makes this build viable. You basically heal a proportion of each tick of damage, which counteracts the effects of Simmering Frenzy, the vampire toggle skill. This is the one change in skill compared to the previous setup, and we replace Inner Light since it was only there for passive use anyway. The other skills slotted are mostly the same. So yeah, anyway, Simmering Frenzy, every second the health cost of the skill goes up, but so does your weapon and spell damage. So, in a well-coordinated group, this can get pretty nuts. You can find loads of examples of this toggle usage on Liko.gg if you want to see in action. I'll stress though that it's not for everyone, as a simple mistake can cause a death, as can greedy play. You can manage it fairly well if you toggle it off and back on, which resets the health cost, or you can, go full out YOLO and hope that you avoid damage and don't get one shot. So in terms of the rotation, it's more or less the same as before, and I'll do you a favour and spare you from having to hear me explain it again. I may or may not have mentioned it earlier, but with the Ring of Pale Order on, no one else can heal you, so you can't blame your healers anymore. You are relying entirely on yourself to heal and stay alive, and keeping your dots up consistently will be the most reliable way to getting those heals from the ring. If you look at Bread's health bar, you can see that it's kind of hopping up and down, and the longer that you have your toggle on, the more extreme the jumps will get. Simmering Frenzy will automatically toggle itself off if the damage does indeed get too high, which helps in some way, I guess. I guess it is worth mentioning though at this point that Simmering Frenzy can be cast off the goadable cooldown. This means that you can pretty much cast your other skills normally, and then cast Simmering Frenzy on top for free at any point. Kind of, anyway. There are a few specifics that you ought to be aware of. Toggling the skill on at any point is usually reliable, but I think there are a few limitations when toggling off. For me, toggling off works best when you cast it as the first skill after a light attack weave, which means that you can do a light attack, then toggle off, then blast bones or whatever skill you would have cast anyway, all in quick succession if you can. On the dummy, this setup did 119k, which is 20k higher than the previous setup. Your mileage though may vary in the raid based on a variety of factors. Other considerations are your vampire stage, for example. You might consider going up a stage or two, which means the health cost will ramp up more slowly. But of course, with increased vampire stage, your non-vampire ability cost will go up as well, and you are more susceptible to fire damage. In addition, Blood for Blood is the vampire spammable costing health, and also works great with this setup should you choose to use it. If you want to fit it onto your bar, I would drop one of your dots, perhaps Scalding Rune, or you could use 5 pieces of Medusa instead of Sorrow and drop Barb Trap and use 1 piece Monster Stead instead and fit the skill onto your bars in that way. Anyway, I'll leave you in peace to focus on the rotation. I can't really tell if I'm distracting you or not, so I apologise in advance. Again, I'll have left the static rotation in the description below if you want a good starting point, and I'll catch up with you as soon as the Parse is finished. Okay, cool. So the general trend is the same, but if you look closely, the average effective spell damage is so much higher thanks to Simmering Frenzy. It's sitting at 8,669 with a max of 10,901 spell damage. Crazy numbers. For reference, the effective spell damage on the first build was 5,678, so an average of 3,000 spell damage difference. Also worth remembering though that we did lose the benefit of Inner Light as a trade-off, but that's a loss of 1,500 effective max magicka, so it's really worth it. We managed to reach a maximum of 47 stacks before having to reset. Oh yeah, we actually use dual wield weapons in this pass, which actually gives a decent chunk of spell damage as well, so Simmering Frenzy does actually contribute less than 3,000, but essentially it's still worth it. The daggers alone would give a maximum of 1 to 2% extra damage, and you can still get similar results on the vampire build with an Inferno Staff instead if you wish to have the range. In terms of the blue CP Slottables, I think it's the same as in the first build, so I'll let this sequence play out for you to check again. So yeah, let's wrap this one up real quick. Thank you for reaching this point of the video. I can tell you now that Magicka Necromancer is going to remain as the most popular damage dealer class to play, so you've definitely made a good choice by clicking on this video in the first place. Now, due to how the YouTube algorithm works, I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up. I heard it'll increase your DPS and crit luck too as well, so it's pretty worth it. Again, do check out Bread and Milk for more Mag Necro footage. He's been uploading recently and I'm sure he will continue to do so in the near future as well. Finally, do remember to check out and share Liko.gg with your friends. This is where the latest builds and gameplay from the new Flames of Ambition patch from hundreds of your favourite ESO content creators will appear daily. Anyway, this is Liko, stay safe and take care. We'll see you soon.